Meeting to order. Eric Upchurch.
Here.
Okay, great, thank you. Alder Ahrens.
Here.
Former Alder Trachtenberg.
Here.
Rothschild's here. And other members of the committee are Northrup, who is not present. Is that it?
Justice.
Oh, Justice Castaneda, he's not, and not present.
Maggie's an alternate.
Oh, Maggie's an alternate, okay. All right, so, John, I do not remember getting the minutes. Are they here?
They are here.
Did they go out in an email?
I think so.
Okay, I didn't see it, so.
This might have gotten caught up in the vortex.
Yeah, I think it might have, because I remember getting an agenda, but not a minutes, which I didn't realize until today. I was on my way here.
Okay, this is the agenda.
Everybody want to take a couple minutes and just look it over quickly before we discuss it?
I think I wrote these.
Does that mean we should look more carefully, or they're okay?
It means that I added in a line there that until we were at the last meeting, I thought was accurate, but apparently it's not, that the subcommittee came to a consensus not to move to full-time alders. Because I thought Justice was sort of backing off that a little bit. Am I wrong on that, or should I leave that in?
I mean, I think there was a fair number of people who expressed interest in continuing to think about the hybrid model, which would be including possibly full-time on that.
Okay.
So, I don't know. What do people feel? I thought there was not consensus on the full-time to take it off the table.
I agree. I think it's
So we gotta make that modification.
All right. Everybody had a chance to glance it out? Do I hear any motions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Minutes are approved. Members of the public that want to make comment, any registrations or correspondence received in writing or anything? City Attorney's Office? No. A member of the public that's present is Brenda. You're not here to give comment right now, are you? All right. Disclosures and recusals of any members of the body?
Good weekend.
Hearing none. So we at this point have a motion to suspend the rules.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so we now are fortunate to have a presentation from the IT department of the City of Madison on what they can do now to help us encourage resident participation, what they can't do, and how much perhaps it would take to be able to do what we might want them to do. And if you just introduce yourself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. My name is Sarah Edgerton, and I'm the City IT Director.
I'm Boyce Johnson. I'm the Digital Media Supervisor.
So, for those of you who don't know, Madison City Channel, the media team, is one of our teams in IT that we are very lucky to have. The media team does not only do Madison City Channel, they also do a lot of digital signage, AV work around the city of Madison, looking at rooms when we're setting them up, when we have new facilities that are getting built, making recommendations on, what needs to be put in those rooms, in terms of, you can feel free to jump in when I'm, cameras, microphones, monitors, anything that needs to build that room so that it has the AV capability that the city needs for those rooms. And then they also do a lot of work with outreach, creating public service announcements, training videos. So they're not just doing coverage of meetings and public hearings, they have a whole other piece that they have to do, and that's work that is part of what they do in their job description. And so this is one reason why when we are asked to cover things that perhaps they can't because they already have other things that they have to do. But I'm gonna let Boyce talk about that. So what I handed out, or we passed around, is just a quick memo that Boyce really wrote on what are all the capabilities in the current state, future state, in terms of Madison City Channel and the coverage, and then future state looking at the testimony via video recording. And instead of us doing a presentation, we thought we would have Boyce walk through it, and then you start just asking questions as Boyce is talking. That is totally fine with us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
All right, so I guess looking at this, as Sarah mentioned, we do a lot more things other than meeting coverage. And I've got some statistics here. I mean, we did 137 regular meetings last year, and in addition to that, 55 special meetings, and that's going to be by bodies that either aren't one of the standing, well, the council or it's county, with the county board, or standing committees of the county council, but the 55 special meetings would also be meetings like this, of task forces, groups, things like that.
When you say you do them, are you talking both audio and visual, or just audio,
Yes.
or just, it's the whole thing? And is it done streaming, or is it on City 12 you're talking about?
Both, although we haven't been on Channel 12 for decades. It's on.
I'm sorry.
On the channel, yeah.
Because it's not 12 anymore.
Correct, it's
Yeah.
not. And at this point, we're going up to 3 cable systems, so it's $9.94 on Charter or Spectrum, 99 on AT&T U-verse, and 99 on Vernon Communications. And then also streaming. So yes, all of the regular meetings are streamed and live, and they're live on the channel, on the cable system.
So the reason that I'm asking that is that I was going to go attend the mayor's forum. It was broadcast. It was told to me it was going to be broadcast. I went there to try to see it in person, and it was full. So I went back and I was told it was being broadcast, and it wasn't. It wasn't on there. I got to see George Dreckman doing a commercial on how to recycle bottle caps. And I also saw about 5 people sitting in a meeting that was a rebroadcast of the Green Fleet. And it wasn't live, but it was streaming live.
Yep.
So how come?
Because that was in the Central Library 3rd floor meeting. As it is right now, we can only go live on the channel from rooms where we have robotic camera systems installed. So that's 201 and 354 in this building, and there are 4 rooms in the Municipal Building. And we'll soon be adding a room at Pinney Library, and potentially there's a 5th floor health conference room here that will potentially have those cameras as well. So we need to have that system in place, and more importantly, we need to have the fiber or copper connectivity from those rooms back to our control rooms on the 3rd floor of this building in order to go live on the channel. In order to stream live, we only need to be able to connect to the city network. So we can do that from libraries, community rooms in police and fire stations, pretty much any city facility.
Okay. But the only thing is I would say, the suggestion is that you run a scroll or something around the bottom and say if you want to see something that's live, to log in to hit stream or something, so people know that it's actually being broadcast somewhere else. I don't know, I'm just saying,
Okay.
because people there were saying, well, you can't get in, you can go home. and watch it.
Can I ask a question?
Eric's got a question.
Yes, Eric?
Yeah, I'm wondering if one, if I could just get a little bit closer to the speakers, and also, is there an explanation as to why the streaming has to be, why there's a requirement for robotic cameras?
Well, there isn't for streaming, and again, it's not necessarily, if we're going live on the channel, it's not really a function of the robotic cameras. It has to do with the fact that the rooms where we have those systems installed have fiber connectivity back to our control rooms. And the only place where we can really go live to the cable television systems from is our head end in room 350 in the city county building. So we have to have that fiber connectivity, or we can do it over coaxial cable if it's within a couple hundred feet. So we can do that with one of the rooms on the third floor. But we have to have that connectivity back to room 350 in order to connect to the cable systems.
And that's just.
Okay, so that's specifically going to the cable.
Right,
Correct.
right, not to streaming.
Correct. For streaming, we can do it in any city facility where we can connect to the city's data network. So we can do that in libraries and fire stations and Monona Terrace, Senior Center, any place where we have connectivity to the city's network.
Okay, and last question, I promise, does this have to be, is there a reason why it has to be the city's data network and not, some other Wi-Fi connection?
Yeah, and it actually can't even be Wi-Fi, it has to be wired. Because what we're doing is we're connecting our production equipment back to a server in the city county building. So that's just a single, it's a single stream, but it has to be a very clean, uninterrupted, high quality stream to get back to the server. And then once it's at the server, then it gets thrown out to the world via the internet. So we just need that one point-to-point connection from our recording equipment back to the city server. And that can't be over the internet, that has to be over the city's secure data network.
And it's for security and quality, or just
It's both.
quality?
It's
Yep.
both. We need to keep it within, internal to our network.
Okay. Thank you.
Long interruption, sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. I think
Yeah.
the interruptions are probably going to be where the value comes from in this.
This is how we were hoping this would work.
All right, good.
So that, I guess, kind of, getting back to where we were there, we do the meeting coverage. We have our regular meetings that we cover as well as these kinds of special meetings. And whether or not we can cover the special meetings depends, it depends on the locations. If it's in a room where we have, again, it's what we kind of talked about. If it's in a room where we have the robotic cameras, that's a lot easier for us. One, it requires fewer people. We can do that with a crew of 2. Whereas if we're in a room like this one, if we were to try to bring cameras in here, it would require a crew of 4. It would require 2 hours of setup versus probably 30 minutes in a room with robotics, 30 minutes to an hour. Another probably hour and a half of tear down as opposed to 15 to 30 minutes in a room that has robotics. So we're really trying to move more toward that. It's less expensive, it takes less time, it's easier for us to schedule.
And it's also trying to find the hourly staff sometimes to be part of those crews can be a difficulty for Boyce as well. And when it's just 2 staff people, he has 5 full-time people that he can bring on, and they will just do these robotic ones when they're doing them in the studio. So it makes a big difference as well.
So currently, how many rooms do you have available? I think you said, I think there are 4. is that
There are
right?
4 in the municipal building. There are technically 3 in this building, although one of them is very small, it's our conference room. And one of them in this building is a county meeting room that was largely being used during the remodeling of the municipal building because that displaced a number of city bodies. So we made an agreement with the county to put cameras in one of their 3rd floor meeting rooms, and bodies like finance and department division heads, and those meetings happen in that room. Now that MNB is back online, they prefer that we go back there, but we do still have equipment in that room, so it's 7 total currently.
Did you say some libraries have robotics, or some libraries are capable for the streaming?
They're all capable of streaming, I believe. None of them have robotics yet. The new Penny
Okay.
is, we're planning on, unless plans change, we're looking at full robotics in that community room.
So one of the things this group has been talking about is the ability for perhaps the council or other important committees to sometimes hold a few meetings other than downtown here. And if I understand what you're saying, that would essentially mean it has to be in one of these rooms that has the robotics, or the only thing that people would see would be the streaming.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And what we're doing with all public works projects that are coming up now, we are suggesting that if they have rooms, like community rooms or rooms where there's a potential for public meetings or presentations or anything that they'd want to have recorded or streamed or run on the channel, if the budget allows, we prefer that they install robotic cameras. If that's not the case, at the very least, what we're asking that they do is rough that in so that we put the conduit and the cabling in place and there are blank panels in place, so if further down the road, we discover that there's demand in that location, it's a lot easier to just move in and install the equipment. The cabling's all in place. So we're doing that in places like Fire Station 14, the new Fleet Services in their community room, and Olbert Gardens.
Brenda, please.
What's a ballpark number for how much it costs per room?
$30,000 to $60,000. It depends on, the size of the room. I mean, a lot of it's going to be audio. If you have to have something that's going to accommodate, say, a 20-person body, something like the Common Council, then in that case you're looking at, for example, let's look at the Municipal Building and some of the larger rooms there. We have 32 wireless gooseneck microphones in each of those rooms. So that really runs the cost up more than anything else. But yeah, 30 to 60 depending upon the size.
Boyce, do you want to speak to, we had conversations with Quasi from Common Council about taking the Common Council on the road last year. And do you want to just speak to what the issues were with that?
Sure, the council is particularly difficult because it's large.
Hence, this group.
Okay, you check off about
And our remote system that we use for recording, and again, you're still limited, you're only going to be able to go live there are no spaces currently outside of these two buildings where you can go live on the cable channel. You can stream live. Big problem with that is, again, there's a 20-person board. You've got staff, you've got the mayor, city attorney, clerk, people at the front too. So that's probably a 32 mic operation. Our remote system that we haul around to do meetings has 16 microphones. It's just logistically, it becomes difficult to cover a meeting of that size. And there just aren't that many rooms out there that can accommodate that. I think when we did that, we identified, the 2 rooms outside of either this building, MNB, or Monona Terrace. We've done council meetings at Monona Terrace in the past, but obviously that doesn't address the issue of bringing it around to other areas of the city.
So maybe you're going to get to this, but let's just go a little bit simpler. So one of the things that we have tried to do is to just do a small group video conference. And we've continually been told we can't do it. So what's the reason for that? Well, we need to be able to have a video conference where members of the committee could participate from a remote location. Well, like Eric today. If Eric were sitting at home and he so chose, he could participate by video, not just audio. And you can see all of us.
You want to talk about that in terms of using this room as an example of why it wouldn't work?
Sure. You would need to have regardless of what specific video conferencing technology you're using, in the room where the body is meeting, you'd need to have presentation equipment so that everyone in the room, including members of the body as well as any members of the public, could see and hear clearly. So, you need, some kind of device for doing the conferencing itself that would need to then be integrated with the monitors on the walls and loudspeakers in the room. This room doesn't have any audio system at all. It has, I guess, this projector, but I don't even know. It looks like there's a, so you could presumably have someone with a computer or some other system bringing that in. Then,
So we were sitting over in the municipal building in a room that had 2 monitors on the wall, nice big monitors.
Mhm.
And we had people with laptops there. We had, they have cameras on them. We could get a portable camera, or those could have cameras on them. All you probably need is one TV
in that room.
in that room.
Right.
It was a small, relatively small room, and it was a 5-person meeting with some other people sitting in the audience. So.
Right, and then the other concern would be that the person on the other end, on the far end of the conference, would need to be able to see and hear
Right.
the members of the, the body
Right.
and members of the public, and if there's any, PowerPoint presentation.
Right.
And that's one issue that we have too, is a lot of the rooms, even when we do have presentation systems set up, they're not set up to do more than one thing at a time. So we've had that issue, for example, with the Disability Rights Commission, who have used conferencing to bring in sign language interpreters. And when we've done that, for example, in room 354, which is the county room up on the 3rd floor, that system is, the room's not set up to do two presentations at once. So, we ran into a problem, and we had one group saying, well, we want to have a PowerPoint presentation, but we need to have the sign language interpreter coming in via video conferencing. Room's not set up for that. So as it is right now, there aren't any rooms that have video conferencing set up and integrated into it. 206 across the street in MMB is designed with that in mind, but we haven't implemented the video conferencing piece yet.
And what does that involve, the video conferencing piece?
There needs to be some hardware attached to the, that's a complex system. It's a controlled system. There's an AV controller behind it so that you can display, different inputs on different monitors. I think there are 3 displays in that room, so you could potentially have your, PowerPoint up on one display. If you had a conference, if the conferencing system was active in there, you could then have your conference, your far end of a conference on another display. There's a touch panel in there that lets you select those kinds of features. So that's the first room where we're looking at implementing that.
I think they've been doing this across the state for 10 years in distance learning, using whatever it's called, is it called WISCNet now, or it used to be BadgerNet, or whatever. And they have, multiple locations and a speaker, and they're doing it. Is there any possibility that you could just kind of tie into that sort of system instead of relying on your own and rebuilding a system? I don't know.
Well, there still need to be some kind of hardware in the room.
Right. So what we're trying to get at is what will it take to get you there? And what's the cost going to be? So, because it's one of the things that we would like to do. We would like to have people in multiple locations being able to participate in a meeting, because they don't want to come all the way downtown. They can't come downtown. They've got childcare needs. They've got, a sick kid at home. They've got a whole lot of
I've got
reasons.
a follow-up question to that too.
Okay?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So maybe I'm oversimplifying this, and forgive me if I am, but I'm wondering, just going back to the video/conference call piece or scenario, what's stopping us from just, I'm thinking of some of the business calls, international business calls that I have. What's stopping us from doing like a go-to meeting conference call or webinar type deal that's also live, has the video capability, and people can call in if they don't need to see the video, or still a real-time thing. And again, forgive me if I'm oversimplifying.
So, and we are already doing some of that actually internally within IT. We're using Skype as our system, and we're doing meetings, but you have to be sitting at your laptop and doing that. When you're talking about a committee meeting, you need to have the bigger picture. It needs to be so that you can see everybody in the room. You need to be able to see that presentation. We have a system called Polycom, which is our hardware system that police and fire use for their briefing system. And so they have that running, and then when they do their briefs, they are able to have all their satellite locations looking at the Polycom system. And what we would like to do is integrate the Polycom within Skype, but first we need to get the policies in place for using Skype internally for the city of Madison, and then the next phase would be using this for committees and et cetera. But we need to get that piece done first. Going back to when City Channel is covering it, then there needs to be that integration too. So that's a third piece to this. So if we were covering this meeting and we were doing the video conferencing, then we'd have to have that other component integrated into that too. And we haven't looked at that yet. I think that this is a bigger discussion than just IT. This is also facilities management having a conversation with us about it. It's also the attorney's office around looking at what are the rules for, like, if there is, talking about having the public being able to participate from other places other than at the meeting itself. What do we do with registering them? What do we do, making sure that they are actually who they say they are? All of these different things come into play. So it's a bigger discussion than just, hey, we have 2 weeks for you to come back with something. I certainly agree with you.
Well,
Right,
those
yeah.
are things that we can deal with.
Yeah,
But
right.
When
And we're
you're
happy to do
here,
that.
all we
Yeah.
really want you to do is to tell us what you need and what it's gonna take to do it, and how long is it gonna take to do it? Because that's the kind of thing that we want to include in our report to the council.
Okay,
And if it involves other people weighing in on that,
Yeah.
like the city attorney's office,
Yep.
they're here.
Yep.
And they will. But, just, we want to know what their capabilities we can have
Sure.
and how much it'll cost to do it,
right.
and how long it would take to implement.
So I think we can talk about the cost that would take IT. I think if we're going to be talking about cost for any facility that's going to be getting built or any facility retrofitting it, we're going to bring in city facilities management. And so we can have that conversation with them.
I would
No
view
problem.
what you already mentioned is reasonably capable as having the places where people gather
Yeah.
to participate in the meeting being the libraries.
Yeah.
Or, police district stations or community centers. Things that are wired now to start, not coming up with new facilities. So,
Right. Oh,
I think libraries have computers in there and they are reasonably well wired, I'm thinking, aren't they?
Yeah, they're on,
Yeah.
they're using city fiber.
They use City Fiber. They've typically been using South Central Library systems for much of their work, but we do have fiber there, so we can attach to the city network.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the question.
Sure.
Without getting into facilities, if somebody wanted to speak to the council, not live, couldn't we just have them sit in front of a monitor and do a video letter to put in that would be sent to you, and you would then put it in a file for, Register 5341?
Right, and that's, I talked about that in the, when the request was to take recorded testimony via video recording, it wasn't clear to me if it was actually looking for that, or if it was looking for more of a conferencing style. But yeah, that would certainly be possible. I think that there are a few issues with that. I guess there are two ways you could approach it. You could either have it come in as a communication or a correspondence, along with in the way that other letters or emails do, and would be accepted and, placed into the record in the same way. Or I guess the other way would be to treat it as testimony, in which case it would be viewed during the meeting. I don't know. Either way, you're going to have someone reviewing these submissions when they come in. They'll potentially have to be converted to a format that's, viewable by everybody and, published to a location that's.
Register, yeah.
Well,
Legistar
Legistar
doesn't
video
do that.
can't be published to Legistar. The video would probably have to be published to something like the city's media site streaming system, and then linked via the record in Legistar. There's a fair amount of work that would happen.
But everything's easy.
Oh, yeah. Technology solves all the problems.
However,
Right.
with that being said, we are just beginning, Common Council passed a capital budget amendment for us to look for a new legislative management system, and this would be one of those things that we would add to it, that this is another component that we want to look at. Yeah.
Second question is, have you ever made any determination of the viewership of meetings?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
For streaming. For cable television,
You don't
no,
know.
that's proprietary information, they are not gonna let us see that. But for streaming, absolutely. Yep, and we can look at, and we actually did an analytic run just yesterday.
Yeah,
So
I
we
can
can break
send
it
that out
down
to
by
you.
body.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is actually very interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What we find is, not surprisingly, the Common Council has the highest numbers. Plan Commission and Finance do pretty well. Some of it's by topic. Whenever Metro Transit is involved, we see numbers spike, and that happens across the board. So whether it's at a meeting or a presentation or anything involving Metro, will typically cause a spike in viewership.
Okay.
But yes, we can get those numbers.
Do people watch the ALRC or not?
Roger asked that same question when we were talking to him the other day.
It's not as amusing as it used to be.
Yeah, it depends on time of year. When you get around renewal time, you get a little more audience.
So I think that in terms of giving video testimony, I think that what I read was the way the city of Austin does that is that there's a cutoff time. You have until noon of the day of the meeting, and you go to a library or some other designated facility, and you make a presentation, and then it gets compiled and made available at the meeting that it's going to be used at.
So
So there is a period of time when it's not absolutely live, it's
Right.
cut off at a time for the reasons that you're talking about.
And they would have to use the city's capture
Yeah.
facilities to do it, right?
Yeah.
And that would solve a lot of the formatting
Yeah.
issues and.
Yeah, and they drop it right into the agenda.
Yeah.
It works pretty slick.
Mhm.
I have some questions about future capabilities. I think you did a good job of explaining some of the limitations of what exists now. The technology that's used to broadcast to cable versus streaming, I assume is just two different systems, meaning like when you're streaming it, you're feeding it into one system, and when you're putting it on the cable, you feed it into another.
Correct.
Is there any way to get any equipment that would interface the stream that you get from somewhere else in the city and put it on cable, or is that just a matter of buying other equipment? I mean, it seems like it's a problem that you should be able to solve as far as, here's a video feed that's coming over the network, and I want to put it over cable.
It's somewhat limited because, for one thing, the cable companies are not compelled in any way to provide anything to
Sure.
us since the Video Competition Act back in '08, I think. So all they provide to us is, basically, in the case of Spectrum, for example, we have to connect to fiber from here through Monona Terrace back to their head end. We can't, they won't let us,
Sure.
do anything over a network or.
Sure, so
any other delivery system.
the room that the Common Council connects to, that has that video feed that then connects to Spectrum and goes there, there's obviously a video feed coming from your control panel that then goes to Spectrum, right?
Right, and that's in room 350 upstairs.
So what stops you from taking a feed from your streaming software and inputting it in the control panel, or inputting it into the Spectrum connection? So Spectrum has some sort of wire that connects to it, right?
Right.
I mean, as simple as that.
But,
I mean, I know it's not that simple, but
Our streaming typically originates from the same place, from room 350. We get back to that via fiber. If we're using a portable recorder, so in sort of the second scenario we're talking about where we can stream, we can't go live, that's not, I mean, that's just network data that goes from that back to the server here in the building. There's no real way to extract that and turn that into, basically a video signal that we could attach via a cable to the equipment that goes to the cable systems. I mean, that's all, it's just data over.
No, I understand, but it's still a video signal. I mean, if somebody gave you a request and said, you know, we'd like some, like, you're at Monona Terrace and you need a second room because there's big demand and you have to put a video signal in there to show it on the television. You guys have the ability to do that. Or heck, I mean, even if it came out of a laptop, you have the ability to go video out of a laptop and plug it into, I mean, you know, it's not ideal, but there is a way to export the video to a more common television signal opposed to this idea that it's just data.
Right, but we can't get the quality that we would want to send to the cable companies. We're not going to be able to get full, you know, 29.97 frames per second, full resolution.
So there'd be no equipment that'd be purchasable that would be able to do that?
No, because it's relying, I mean, you could convert it to, you know, HDMI or something like that, which then you could convert to SDI and run out to the charter. But again, we're not going to be able to guarantee that we're going to be able to get full resolution, you know, full frame rate video out of the streaming signal.
Okay. And then I assume you guys are using some sort of software that's helping with the titling and helping switch inputs and cameras and stuff like that. There's some sort of platform behind that. Do you know if there's any sort of plugins that people are using to bring in stuff like Skype or GoToMeeting or anything like that? Are there, I mean, what we're talking about, I assume we're not inventing things that people aren't doing.
Right.
So we're not the first people that are going to ask for this in the world.
Yeah, the switcher can bring in Skype. That's the only
Thing that you're aware of at this time that it could bring in.
right. This manufacturer does support Skype natively, but other than that, you know, not directly.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. It might be, so WIU broadcasts from the library, don't they?
Yep, their playout server is in the basement of the library, and then that goes from there via fiber to our closet on the third floor of this building, where it then gets multiplexed with our signal and sent to Spectrum.
So can you do it from the downtown library or not?
If we knock WYOU out.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
only one line that connects it.
Okay.
That said, I mean, the central library would be a good candidate for future expansion because it would, you know, we already have fiber strands identified between those two locations, and it wouldn't be that difficult to add another line. So,
Question is, we've got this laundry list of wonderful things we'd like to do for meetings and taking testimony, et cetera, in the future. How long would it take you folks, in consultation with other people, to put together a plan that would say, here's what we need to do to accomplish this and what it's going to cost? Because it clearly couldn't do it in 2 weeks. That we gave you such a lead time to put together this. But I mean, that, because in our report, we got to, I think the committee has to figure out, task force has to figure out, are they going to recommend that certain things be done now? Are they going to say we need to have these agencies put a plan together that will tell us how and when we can do these things? And so I think it's kind of important, I think, for the task force to know how much time and money are we talking about to get to some of these ends that we've got here, or how long would it take you to figure out how much time and money it would cost?
The other thing I would have to look at is staffing.
Yep.
So,
Yes.
you know,
That's time and money.
that is time and money. And does the media team need more staffing, or does other parts of IT need more staffing, right? So, I mean, there's that look that I have to look at too, and what that balance is. And would there be enough work if we were to bring in more full-time staff, or would Boyce have to work with his manager to rethink how the media team distributes their work? Because right now, it is full-time staff that are running these meetings, running these public hearings, and doing all of the studio work. And would it be that maybe it was hourlies that were doing that? I mean, that would be a decision that we have to look at. Do they have that capability if we were to hire hourlies to do that? So there's more to it than just we bring in more staff, because if we bring in more full-time staff, there probably wouldn't be enough work for them all the time. So we have to look at that as well. I would say probably 3 weeks to line up all the meetings that we have to have and the conversations. Just looking at my own calendar, I'd say a month, but I'll move stuff around.
It might be an easier job if we didn't have so many committees.
Or smaller council.
Or smaller companies.
Yeah.
Wouldn't need so many cameras.
And
I mean,
can we look at it from that perspective?
I'm not the person that can authorize you to do it, but that kind of information is something that we're gonna want.
Right, and I'm
So,
happy to give it to you.
is that you that asked that for that? I mean,
Well, I mean, I think if we know what we want them to put together, we can ask them to do it.
Yeah.
But I just think we are at the mercy of the other work that they have to do
Right,
when they
right.
get back to
I
us.
think the good news is, I mean, I think what was helpful here is to understand what exists now.
Right.
And what some of the hurdles are for us to understand if we want to do the remote meetings, the remote testimony, or the pre-recorded testimony, or whatever it is. I think including that to the committee, I think is what's going to be most important.
But I think ultimately, we're gonna have to put dollar signs on
Oh, yeah,
this stuff.
absolutely.
So
No,
that's why I'm
absolutely.
saying, I think it's something we need to,
Yeah.
But I think without being very specific, I mean, if it turns out that the council disagrees with the idea of having a roaming road show, for them to put together a bunch of work to figure out how to make that happen is just, it's a waste of their time.
well, right, it is. But I think, if I have been reading what people are saying, we definitely will recommend that there be other alternative means for participation at meetings. And that would be a two-way video connection.
Okay, so,
And regardless of whether the council moves from location to location, assuming that they're there, we still would like to have that. And same for boards and committees, whether we do it for all of them, that's probably something that would be determined by the chairs of those committees, or, if we have a separate committee that's established that or a department that is actually involved in the, what's it called? We don't know what it's called yet. We discussed what it's called. But anyway, a separate department in the city that's in charge of outreach, or inreach, or whatever we happen to call it, then that would be another, those are things that we would like really to do, I believe. Is have the ability for people to participate in meetings from other locations, other than where the meeting is being held.
But it depends what you mean by participate. For example, people just recording their position and putting it online, as least as I understood, that sounds like relatively low-hanging fruit.
it's low-hanging fruit in one way and then not in the other, because we don't have a new system and it can handle it, I think, in a way that would be very seamless. Looking at a new legislative management system, or upgrading what we have today, we'd be able to do that. Doing it right now, currently, I think would be actually a lot of setup on our part, and then working with the libraries to get that in place. If it was something that was part of a new system coming in, that would just be part of that cost.
It
So,
also
I
sounds-
think we that is information that we'd like to have.
Yeah, no, and that's
great.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we can do is we can give you ballparks around looking at city facilities and identifying. So like, I don't think that we need to do something at the Larry Nelson Building and their conference room, but we would look at the libraries, Warner Park Community Rec Center, those things, places that are city facilities that it makes sense that we would do coverage there, and then how much that would cost for us to do that. Looking at putting in the two-way, whatever else, putting in the robotics, et cetera. And then we can give you, we'll break it down into, this is what it would take for two-way conference, this is what it would take to have the coverage with the media team.
Okay, great.
Does that sound good? Yeah.
So you mentioned,
Could we also-
oh, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, could we also, and I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, but could we also include, the idea of the numbers around the remote participation, like Skype and/or GoToMeeting or video conferencing tool, whether what we would need to pay for to learn about the capabilities or the possibilities, or to add a potential software, et cetera. Is that something that we could include in this?
Of course.
So, Sarah, you mentioned, and I guess wasn't aware that you're looking at a new legislative information management systems.
We are.
And there's like 2 or 3 things that we've also talked about that that I think fall into that category.
Oh.
Some of them are what are almost like social media kind of components of it, but the ability for people to do something that I think's been called agenda commenting, where in advance of a meeting, people can vote for, against, or neutral on an agenda item, and then and then they get feedback from that, and then have a kind of subscription kind of service, and I don't know whether it's how that feed works, but for people who give input, to give input back to them, they give input on it, and also then be able to get input back from what the decision is on a fairly timely and prompt manner. I know, as an outside user of Legistar, I found it incredibly difficult to find out what happened when I go to look at it, until like it's just before the meeting that it's already too late. So,
So following the resolution along.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is, I would think would be a component of any modern system.
It's amazing when you look at the range of what these systems can do.
Yeah, and the dollar signs go up, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think, I guess I already. I noticed interestingly enough, and I think one of the things that at least has hit me as being important to try to do is to have a platform for giving feedback to people who are willing to participate. That they've already given input, and we ought to recognize that they have given input, thank them for it, and have a system which would also ask very specific questions for people. You came and you gave input. We would like to know the following thing from you. What do you think about this? And have those come back as well. So, kind of follow-up kind of things, and I think people are doing that. And interesting, I don't know if you saw yesterday's Wall Street Journal. There was a long article from a guy from somewhere in Texas or somewhere. He wrote this long thing about, if you're out there listening, I've said this about airline seats. I have said this about this. I said nobody's paying any attention. And like 3 pages later, there was an ad for SAP. It said, we handle all this stuff, and they call it experience management. Mm-hmm. That kind of feedback, I think, is an important part of making people feel like what they took the time to say was at least heard. So,
and I say this a lot. Software is great, but if your processes are not in place, software just highlights the issues, right?
Right.
So this is also a lot of what you're talking about is process.
Mm-hmm.
This is talking about staffing and how staff is going to have to change how they do their business. So that should be a recommendation, and then from there, then we can look at software that can assist them in doing their job.
At our other BCC meeting, we talked about that, and Alder Kimball has a proposal to make that part of the whole council structure and the committee structure to have a separate staff that handles this kind of, and we had a discussion about whether IT should be a part of that department or not a part of that department. I mean, an IT person. So anyway, we've thought about that, and I think absolutely that's right. You have to use it. You can't just have the capability.
Yeah, and I can say
there's got to be a commitment to do that.
There is a lot of, we have built stuff for agencies, we have purchased stuff for agencies, and it hasn't been used because they didn't have a process in place before. And so moving forward, we're very much, let's get that process established, then we'll look at the software.
Yeah.
That's what I don't want to waste money.
Right. Dave?
Yeah. I know many people will say this, but in terms of Legistar, what's needed is improved ease of access to it. That's probably one of the motives for trying to review it or try to get something new, is that I've found it, and really sometimes continue to find it fairly impenetrable. And after 6 years, really it's only in the last year or so that I feel like, oh, I'll go to Legistar and I will probably be able to find the answer to this. but the first years I didn't. I mean, I don't have an ease with software. In fact, when I was at university, somehow early on I was identified by IT, by DoIT, as being, I don't know, they must have had a term for it, like an idiot. So that when they would try out new software, they would have me try it and film me trying to work through it, while someone else would ask me, so why did you choose that button or this button, or whatever it was? And then they would come back with a different one, cameras would be on me again. So I could volunteer when you get the...
Well, thank you. We always used to, when I ran the web team, it wasn't, and no offense to George Druckman, we would always say, this is going to work for George. And so we would oftentimes have George, even if it had nothing to do with him, work through it. And if he could make it work, we knew that we had succeeded.
Good.
Yeah. So,
Older lawyers are good getting things to it.
I welcome that. Yeah, we will. Maybe you can be on the RFP.
Retirement job.
Yeah.
Useful idiot.
The biggest thing with any legislative management system also goes back to that process and the training that goes behind it. If staff is not saving documents so that we're able to search them quickly, if they're not following what the legislative process is themselves, then it also makes it harder. And so we're certainly going to have to look at that piece when we come back to what this new legislative management system is. It's going to be rethinking that whole process and how do we train them. I know that when I first brought in the upgrade of the legislative management system, we trained everybody. You were part of that. So all 120 users had to come in and do a 4-hour training, and then they had to learn what the process was. But most of those people have retired, and it's just, I think that training didn't get carried over.
Yeah.
So that's something the city
Yeah.
has to look at, like what kind of training do we need to continuously do every year?
Yeah, I recommend that we have this question survey about training new alders, since there'll be a majority of new alders. And that really, for me, the number one thing for people to be trained on is don't assume people are going to know how to use or feel comfortable with Legistar, that if it's a key resource for them, it's maybe difficult, but to really offer it and make that very available for everyone, whether it be done through your office or the clerk or someone. But I think it's really a critical piece to doing the job.
Yeah, I agree.
So, what I'm saying to you is that if you have things like that that you think are important for us to look at, you should include them in the report.
Sure.
We don't know what software they're looking at and so forth, and what additional cost it is. So I think that in the end, when it comes to implementation of our recommendations, those are all going to be asked anyway, so
Okay.
we should have that information in our report.
I'm not sure if it was included in the request of things to look at, but one is this idea of taking video evidence, where people can come in and go to a library and say something in video that can then be transmitted and made available, not at the meeting, but just to council members, so if that was on the list.
Yeah, we covered that, and we can go into a little bit more detail.
Okay.
Do you want us to talk about that right now, or?
I don't know that I really have much more to add. We kind of talked about, there are a couple of different ways that you can take that on, either as testimony or as correspondence. Sounds like this is more of a, well, and I guess the Austin model that we talked about, where there's actually there's city equipment that they're using. I mean, that's nice because it kind of standardizes what's
Right.
coming in versus someone, okay, well, I'm just going to talk to my phone and, hope that somehow makes it through and,
It also addresses records, which is a huge component for us in everything we do. So
Yep.
we're always thinking about, where is our record? Are we going to be able to pull it up? And so if somebody was to do that and then to upload it to YouTube, it belongs to YouTube, it doesn't belong to us. And so then we wouldn't be able, so if they took it down, so we did a link to YouTube and said, okay, here's this video of the testimony, and then they took it down, then we have an incomplete record. So that's why having it in a system that we
Mhm.
own.
Yeah, so people are using city equipment, it's being transmitted from that equipment to wherever it ends up via city network and a city process. Presumably there'll be some kind of registration or,
Right.
opportunity for people to identify themselves, their address, whether they're affiliated with an organization, obviously the lobbying considerations, things like that. Yeah, no, I think I like that idea. It gives a lot more control versus just having things coming from the wild where you can't necessarily verify the origination.
Right.
Mhm.
A key component for this group was it allows people to participate without having to come downtown and wait 4 hours to get their 3 minutes on topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are asking a lot of our public when we ask them to come downtown and do that.
I mean, that said, there's some drawbacks, of course, too. I mean, there's no way
Right.
you can ask questions of them. I mean,
Right.
you're just stuck with what they have,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Eric, are you still there?
I am here.
Did you have any more comments or questions for the people from IT at this point? If not, I mean, they've been here for an hour. I don't want to take any more of their time.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah. I'm sorry to talk, but none other question other than just if there is a time frame for when they are to have assessed and vetted a replacement or complementary system to Legistar, and what kind of input this committee or this task force can have on that search.
Okay. So, we're gonna be doing our kickoff, probably at the end of this month. And, then what we'll be doing is writing the RFP requirements. So at that point, that's where we could come back to the committee and ask for what are the requirements. I've heard 3 things so far, and it sounds like there's probably a lot more. And then we put those into the RFP. I think that 2019 is going to be just looking for and then doing the contract, and then we'll implement in 2020. And I have to tell you, if we go to a brand-new system, that implementation is going to take a while, because that data conversion is going to be incredible.
Okay, that's very helpful.
I have a parochial question for Boyce. Why aren't you hooked up with GDS? They say no? What?
They did not, and we will revisit that. When they first approached us, they had very few subscribers within the city of Madison, and they were requiring us to purchase, I believe it was a Motorola encoder that was already at end of life for about $12,000 for a standard definition encoder. And again, at the time, they had only a handful of subscribers in the city. We were planning on looking at that again this year to see if maybe they've got a better delivery system in mind to get a signal to them. But yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to be, to distribute using any method we can.
Well, I know they went back in my area with fiber optic as a backbone.
Yeah, they're mainly on the west side, and then they are doing all of the suburbs.
Right.
And then, so they're hitting some of our McFarland residents that are Madison residents, and then some of the Sun Prairie and over. But they really are that kind of far west side to southwest side.
I'm in the far west side.
Yeah.
I'm just inside development.
Yeah, we'll revisit that and see what their numbers are looking like. And if they, again, the transmission method that they demanded last time was costly and onerous, and we didn't really think it, we'd see the return for it, but they've obviously expanded their system since then. So.
Well, let me know what happens if we need anything.
What speed do you, if you're using it from the library, what kind of, I don't know, megabits per second or something, do you have to have a good enough quality video for somebody to transmit their testimony downtown or wherever it's going to be?
If it was on City Network?
Well, yeah, I mean, or if we're using the library's connection, is that the city network?
So, yeah, the library has fiber that has been built to, either through contracts that we have with providers as part of being on our conduit, all this other stuff. So, for example, when Penny is built, SuperNet will come in and they're gonna be the ones that are pulling the fiber there, but then it will connect to the city fiber and the city will own that fiber. So they're on city fiber, there is no concern there with that.
And one last question. At one meeting that we had in Northport, we were able to set up a Skype encounter. It was kind of elementary, but it worked for that purpose, which was that the chair of the task force was not here, and Rebecca Kimball had a computer that could interface with whatever she had out in Arizona. So we could see her on the screen, and she could see us to the extent she could through the little eye on Kimball's computer. Is that something that anybody could do in any of our offices that were wired that way, or?
Yeah, so you could use Skype. I think that what the key piece there is that she can only see that eagle-eyed back,
Right.
right? And if there are presentations, I mean, that's the shortcoming here as well for Eric, is that he doesn't get to see the whole thing. And so it's if there are presentations, if there are more parts of and components to that meeting, they're missing out on that.
Right.
And I guess that's a question for this group, is the full experience important when having these meetings or not?
I guess
When
you
we're
take what
talking
you can
like,
get.
when we're talking the plan commission, you do need to be able
Right,
to
yeah.
see everything.
Yeah,
And so that's really key, is to what committee is it? I mean, I certainly think the council needs to be able to see the full decision and see all of the presentation pieces as part of that.
Mhm.
So that's something you would.
But in a case like that, where really it's just people sitting and talking in there, I don't think there are any visuals that are being presented at all.
Yeah.
Is a better camera available that could be on there that would give more of the fisheye and a better picture for the person on the other end that isn't in the room? Because I assume if we had a TV, we could put that person up on the TV room without any trouble.
So we have these, that's what I was talking about, these Polycom systems, and apparently they don't have one in here, it must be in their.
This is only their
internal.
training room. don't worry.
Yes, in their internal, where all the fancy stuff is, they have a Polycom system. So they can do that back and forth where they can ask questions and
Yeah.
you can see everybody.
Right, and then there's another level once you add our team, if we're covering something for television or for streaming, we need to be able to tie into that as well. So we would need to be able to grab the image of the person on the far end of the image of it, and also make sure we have good audio of that. And so in that case, then we can use those existing, so the cameras that we use, the cameras that we have in the council chambers and in places like that, and the microphones, audio systems and things like that. If you integrate conferencing into a room like that, then the conferencing will simply use those cameras and those microphones and those loudspeakers. So the experience is seamless for the people in the room. You don't have to have someone trying to set up a laptop, attach a microphone to it, attach a camera to it. It's built into the room.
So if next Tuesday, we were in the room over there, 150.
53?
No, not one, well.
206.
206?
Would be ideal.
Could we do a Skype call like that?
Not, because they don't have Polycom set up there.
Right, or there is a Polycom codec in the closet, but it's not activated yet.
We could do it parallel, right? If City Channel was there and broadcasting it with the signal out, so Eileen could see the whole thing on her TV, either through streaming or whatever, and then we had her set up separately with Skype so that the people in the room could see her, hear her. That could work, right?
Not really, because you probably got about a 45-second delay on the streaming going out.
That would be good.
So then coming back, yeah.
That would make for some odd minutes.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then we wouldn't have a visual of if she's
Right.
connecting via Skype
But
on
if the
someone's
whole-
laptop.
But if the whole goal is just for her to be able to see the room and participate, but if there's a 45-second delay, then that wouldn't work.
Right.
But it does suggest that there are different levels that you need.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you've got a small committee where all that's needed is somebody on the other end can see the committee members and hear what they're saying, that's different than presentations that are being made and and things like that.
Correct, and our hope is to build out rooms and facilities at different levels. And MMB is a really good example of where we started to look at, okay, here's a small conference room that only has simple presentation capabilities. Next step up is a room that has presentation capabilities, plus video capture, streaming, and recording capabilities. And then there's a third step where, okay, you have all those things, and then we'll add video conferencing capabilities. I actually just had a meeting with police before I came to this one about their training facility on Femrite. We need to rebuild the system there, and that's exactly the thing we're looking at, is different tiers.
Yeah.
So you can have one thing that's just simply for presentation, then you just add services. So, and part of that is education too, is making sure that people know which rooms are available, which rooms have which features, so that they're going to appropriate spaces.
Right, and the other part of that is I think that, and this would be more not in what you're writing up, but then policy that would come from IT or this outreach or whatever, where you're looking at what kind of meeting are you having? Is it a meeting like this? Then Skype is just fine. But if this is a meeting where you want to have public comment or you want to have this, then you need to do this. So that we're giving them almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for?
Menu?
Thank you. A menu of the different items that they can pick and select from for when they're going to do their meeting, and then where they need to go for that. And who they need to contact. And that's another piece that we'll have to build in here, is that support. There's going to be AV support here that is not currently there, that we would have to add to it.
John, I guess
Okay.
before they go,
Yeah.
we ought to make sure they're very clear about what we're asking them to do.
Yes.
I
Okay?
think you said a month, right?
Yep,
It would take you a month.
yep, we'll do them.
I think that will be okay in our, it might not be in our preliminary
Right.
draft, but we're going to do a lot of discussing. And by the time we get through with discussing things in the task force, which will include recommendations, that's when we really need
Yeah.
to have a better idea of what it will take to do some of these things,
Okay.
and whether we think it's worth it to recommend doing. And if you do have questions about what we want, ask.
What I will do is, once I get everything put together in terms of what we're going to be looking for, I'll send it out.
Okay.
Send it to the two of you. And
Certainly send it, maybe send it to our office first.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, and then let me know what I'm missing.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you
welcome.
for
Thank
taking
you.
time to come on
Thanks.
short notice. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, we have other business. We can try to get to some of it, anyway. I sent with you guys the last time the minutes of the, whoops, that's it, the excerpts of the minutes from the meetings that we had that related to topics 3 and 4. So, do you guys, do you have them, or do we, or David, do you have them?
No, I don't.
Are there any extras that you collected? They didn't go electronically, as far as I know. Passed around in paper, and I think I only have one left, my own. But I might,
Here's a copy.
I couldn't, probably say. Okay. Did you get one? Okay.
Give me this
I can, I have it electronically. Okay, so, we are, I think we are at the point of revisiting these issues that we talked about before. They were fairly complete minutes. I tried to group them a little bit into being related to an order that I thought we could talk about them in, but mostly I just sort of set them out a little bit differently than they were in the, it was more, one of them at least was done in more of a narrative style than a bullet point style, not a pluses and the minuses. So we talked a lot about compensation, the factors which would go into making compensation. And really, I think we're at the point on this as to whether or not there's anything that we didn't capture here, or any changes that we want to make after some of the discussions that we've already had on compensation of council members. And of course, It's that same, obviously, if you're gonna ask people to take a full-time job, it's different kind of compensation consideration than if it's, you keep things just like they are now. Or if you decrease the number of alders significantly. Those are two people say they're gonna have more to do, but that, and then we've got the staffing levels and the support that they have. So it's hard to narrow in just on this, but
Well, one of the things is, where are you gonna, you only have so many dollars, and where are you gonna put your dollars? For example, in order to try to get more diversity on the council, you keep the wages where they are, or more modest increase, but to have things like, for instance, childcare provide transportation. So one of the things is prioritizing, if we're gonna spend money, where do we wanna put the money? Or instead of spending money, giving more salary, do we provide more staff so that the analysis that the individual alders can get is more to their liking as far as the usability for them doing their job. So besides salary, you also have to look at the implications of that we're taking dollars from other services that may be more valuable depending upon, where you're putting your chips.
Yeah, just, I'll agree with Ron. I guess the issue of more money, part of that is not only what are we not funding, but the political negativity and happiness, general unhappiness about having elected officials raise their own salaries. Unless there would be a pretty sharp reduction in the number of alders, I think having a meaningful qualitative increase in salaries is politically untenable.
The raising of the salaries, just before it's voted on, there's a big blow up. And after it's voted on, there's still some shrapnel flying around. But it seems to die out as a pretty quick subject. So,
Yeah, I mean, so I
The mayor raises it all the time though. How the council raised its salary from, what it was, like $8,000 to $11,000. He raises it all the time.
And look how effective it's been getting council members reelected.
I don't know, but I mean, it's still, what I'm saying, it's something that can be kicked around for a long time for
Sure.
little benefit.
I was literally just going down the elevator with one of the council staff members, and she said she actually did, and so this must exist, she actually did what inflation looks like for council salary over there. And so I'd love to hand that out. The idea that I don't think this committee really needs to worry too much about what's politically, an issue or not when it comes to spending money. There is actually, I was sitting here a second ago going, there is no limit. At some point, we should be spending what's necessary to have the kind of government people want us to have. And at some point, when you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a budget, if you're not going to spend some additional extra dollars to have good public participation and good public officials representing you and making that more fair, then what are we doing here? But there is actually a limit to how much money we're allowed to spend because of caps. So I definitely acknowledge that we have a cap limit. But as far as politically, I think that is something that the council will need to decide when it comes up there, how much they care about the political ramifications of either increasing the salary or increasing the money towards support services. But at some point, you get what you pay for. If you're looking to only spend $12,000 part-time, you are cutting a portion of people out that are able to do it, period. We know that. If you're not looking to spend money on childcare, not just for alders, but actually public coming to meetings, you are precluding or making it much more difficult for people to participate. So I think, those decisions on how much should we actually spend, the council will need to decide politically, but I think it's, I don't think, council members need to worry about too much, what the reaction to it as much as just being able to explain it, and give that options to people and hear what the feedback is. If citizens strongly believe when those options are presented to them that, spending an extra, few dollars here and there is a bad use of public funds, and they're okay with the level of public participation as well as, the ability for people to run for council, then it is what it is. But in my opinion, I don't think this subcommittee or the task force as a whole should really be overly concerned with the political ramifications of this stuff, other than possibly noting it. More of just, here are the options.
Questions I have in terms of what this group or the task force more likely in the final report might want to include is, are you going to want to put dollar figures on some of these options? Because if so, we're probably going to have to start digging around to find what it is. And you could just pick an option. Keep the same number of alders and double their salary. What is that going to cost? Right. Reduce the number in half and double their salary. What does that cost? Add childcare for council members and any members of the public at each common council meeting. What is that going to cost?
I'm very, don't get me wrong, I'm sensitive to the budget. We have just so much money we could spend as a whole, and every dollar we spend on something else, we can't spend on something else. But I really do think that this committee should be making its recommendations primarily based on what's good government first, and then budget policy second. And so, because I think I think when you start getting down that route, yes, you start putting price tags on this stuff. We could be spending another 6 months trying to figure out the price of just the IT stuff. Let alone how much it's going to cost to staff a constituent service office, or or the processes you need to put in place to do review of the videos that people come in, or staffing additional staff for video meeting. Yeah, the list is endless, but I do think the priority should be what is good government first, and then you could start filling in the picture around budget, because budget is, you also have the whole flow chart again.
So, to me, I think in the end, the task force, maybe as we narrow things down and things drop out, we don't need to know what we're not doing that because of cost. We're doing that because we don't think it's all that effective, or it's not part of our recommendation. But I would like to see us maybe not get real precise numbers for estimates, but set forth like a range, under $100,000, more than $100,000, but less than $250,000, and more than $250,000 and less than $1 million. That kind of, I don't know what the right ranges are, but it's some indicator that it's a little expensive, it's kind of expensive, or it's very expensive, kind of categories that you put these things into. Because we're never going to get precise numbers on a lot of this stuff. Sure, we can do it for council salaries, and assuming that there are 20 people and we raise their salaries by 10%, we know what that number is going to be. But if we start throwing in benefits, then we can figure that out. Or when we get to these other things, like what we're talking about for resident participation, it's so dependent on how many locations and how many cameras and all this. We're not going to get to those fine numbers. And if the council's interested in pursuing that, they'll have to do an RFP and get those numbers. But I think for our purposes.
So I think at this point, you're telling us not to worry about the numbers, and maybe when you get further along, you might want some rough guesses. Well, just seems to me when you produce your final report, if you're going to say, we think this is somewhere we ought to go, the next question somebody's going to ask is, how much? Do you know how much that's going to cost?
Absolutely, and that's what. But I'm just saying, I don't know how precise we need to be about that.
Right.
And I do think we have to include that in the end. And I don't know what Eileen's thought about this. How she wants to portray it, whether she wants to. I'm just speaking for myself
I think
here.
the amount of options that this subcommittee is going to present to the task force is long.
Yes.
And so I think the exercise of trying to put price tags on that now is way more work than is necessary. And I also would rather have some discussions about the good government, having good government discussions, and then let's pretend we all say yes. We feel strongly that full time is the way to go, and it should be 20 alders, and each alder should have 3 staff members, and here's why, and everybody needs their own helicopter, and we go down that route. it's okay to take a step back after there and go, you know what, we can't afford a helicopter.
I
and
thought you
here's
were
why.
settling for a car.
Well, wait, let's aim high.
Tesla,
Right. Yeah, but the, you know, the idea, I think the idea that, you know, I think it's, I think it's a mistake to say we can't do certain things because of cost. We don't know that. We don't know what the political reality is until we actually try. And I think, you know, I'd rather be able to make a case for it's a really good idea. And I'm not, and actually, if you ask me what the ideal scenario is, I'm not leaning towards full-time anymore. And I was probably when this started. But if everybody strongly believed, or the task force strongly believed full-time was the way to go, I think that case should be made. And then, you know, you can figure out kind of the money afterwards. And then if the community, you know, has a big outroar and or we can't find the money, then you have to say, okay, here's why we couldn't do this, and then go back to plan B. But yeah, I think taking that whole menu of stuff that you're sending as, you know, things for the task force to consider and trying to put price tags next to it now, it's way too much work, and it's almost kind of distracting, because again, much rather focus on the government ramifications and the public ramifications of those decisions opposed to the financial. At least that's my opinion.
Mhm. Eric, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you. Honestly, I'm at a point in this part of the conversation that, you know, it seems like this is something that we are going to discuss with a larger group, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. I mean, there's so many different angles here, so I think this is something that we should really talk with the rest of the group. And I'm not saying that we should discuss it now, but I'm just looking forward to that discussion. And I feel like I've said most of what I needed to say in this area.
Yeah, and are you satisfied that what you wanted and have said has been captured in the minutes? Is there anything you wanted to add to the minutes that you don't think are in there now? Because this is what will go to the whole committee. We want to make sure that we've captured those things. Not that you wouldn't be precluded from saying them again, but at least we got some first time.
Yeah, as I understood, I asked previously if the things that I was saying were being captured, and I have confidence in that. I think, yeah, you know, if things come to mind, I'm happy to reiterate. I plan to be at that meeting, the full task force meeting.
Okay. Brandon?
I don't know if this made it into the notes or not, but I'm still concerned that if you're talking about diversity and you want to include people with disabilities and low-income people and people on fixed incomes, at some point, if you raise the salary too high, you impact their other benefits.
It's here.
It's in there? Okay, all right. Just want to make sure. I don't have a copy.
With your name.
All right, good.
What isn't in there is that under state law, you can decline some or all of your salary. So some of those people may be in a position where there's a certain amount they take and a certain amount they decline to maximize both their benefits and the salary. And I don't think that existed when you were on the council.
It wasn't.
There's a provision which specifically now, you have to say it, and once you say it, you're stuck with it for your term. But you have the ability to decline some or all of your salary.
And you do that before you're elected or after you're elected?
After you're elected.
But before you take office?
Before, like you've got 2 months or something to say it, and then you're stuck with it for the rest of it. I'd have to get the exact language. It was, I can't remember why it was put in. You can do it. So that's an aspect of that it may slightly reduce the impact on some low-income people.
Okay. Well, we're done with talking about the compensation then, I guess, and we'll move on to, we captured here non-compensation factors to make the job of Alder less demanding, and we certainly spent a lot of time talking about that. Identifying, and again, mostly identifying things that could be added to take care of it, including staff, transportation, childcare, and of course, we clearly have discussed in other places as well as here the number of committees.
Okay, guys, I have to run here in the next couple of minutes. Is there anything in particular that folks would need my comments or input on?
Eric, the only thing is, and it's in there, is the things that we were talking about with the IT folks today. We have a very long list that we included in it, and in terms of the various kinds of participation that we would consider to help. So, and I think we captured what you had to say about that pretty well, but it won't be too late for you to add it, when we get to the council meeting, but we do have, we have to write this interim report, so we tried to capture everything in there. And this is just an opportunity to go through and make sure we covered everything.
Okay, okay, I hear what you're saying. I will have to jump off in about a minute or so, but
Okay.
I want to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Okay, well, thank you for making the time to participate by phone. Appreciate
Oh,
it.
this is really helpful. I appreciate it.
Anything anybody wanted to add on this non-compensation factors to make the job of Alder less demanding? Assuming that we wanted to keep part-time. Clearly, if we'll make it more demanding if we have fewer and we make it full-time. All right, moving on then to discussion of structural and procedural issues relating to equity and meaningful engagement of residents in council decision-making. Pretty extensive notes.
Yes. Just as on 2A, on the time limit issue, because I would say this often results in meetings that last late into the night, even when we don't have lengthy debates sometimes, but just a very deep schedule, we go late into the night. And that really is the point that I wanted to make, is that late night meetings shut most people out. It shuts a certain percentage of alders out of actively participating. It absolutely empties the stands of people who've come to hear us and or participate in the discussion. And it, I assume all of our dedicated watchers at home have shut off the TV by 10 or 11 o'clock.
Assume a fair number of people have to go to work the next morning.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And the other piece of this is, for those people who are employed, when we have a succession of late night meetings, and I'm talking those meetings that are after midnight, I don't know how people function the next day. I mean, I don't go home after 1 o'clock in the morning and just go right to bed and go right to sleep. I mean, I'm still debating the issue till 3 or 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
So, I think the issue then is how, we often say how people who are employed are at a disadvantage very often for being on the council because it's having essentially 2 jobs. And this makes one job force out the other. But I think that the major points are the 3 ones in terms of the late night, which is really how all of these parties function. That is the alders, people who want to participate, and people who are watching at home and want to be engaged just as an audience. I know that there's been an attempt, Ken Golden had an amendment a decade ago saying meetings have to be adjourned after, something to the effect of after midnight. You can't take up
11.
another item.
I think it was 10:30 or 11.
11.
And they would.
All righty, folks, I gotta run.
Okay.
Everybody.
All right.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Eric.
Bye-bye.
But there was a suspension.
The way that worked is, the rule was you ended the meeting at 10:30 unless there was a motion and a vote approved by 2/3 of the council to extend the meeting.
And the extension is just open.
Open. Yep.
Oh.
The result of that was that at every meeting, council would take an additional 10 to 15 minutes at 10:30 to debate whether to keep working. And the motion never failed. We always kept working. Eventually, the decision was made, those are 10 or 15 minutes we don't need to spend debating whether we're going to keep working, because we're always going to keep working.
Yeah.
Could have made it non-debate.
Well, it could have been non-debatable, or it could have been just a rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I assume you could move to suspend the rules, and a two-thirds vote on that, you can do it, but yeah.
Not to insult the common council, but a lot of these late meetings are self-inflicted. You know, it's just a lack of discipline. And, you know, I mean, I understand there's a zillion speakers, you know, there's that situation, but, you know, when you spend a half hour congratulating somebody and you know you got this long agenda, or one alder in specific was like 3/4 of his district, you know, for getting some street in the budget or something, a lot of it's self-inflicted. Somehow it's gonna have to take some discipline to say, hey, guys, if you want to do a press release, do it tomorrow morning in writing, please.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, there are many different pieces to how this always stacks up.
And I
you know.
understand that.
There's this element, and that element, and this element. So it's very difficult to sort of say, okay, we're not going to do the thank yous piece, but we're going to do, you know, B through Q still. So I think that's why rules are necessary, just to put a cap on it. Because at a certain point, it's, you know, I can't control this myself.
But you see,
So-
the option is, if you're not going to adjourn, if you're going to adjourn at 10:30, that means you're going to come back the next day, or a couple days later or something like that. So I'm not too sure there's a great cure on it. I mean, you're either going to go late, or you're going to have two meetings.
My view is, as someone who's been to 10,000 meetings,
I understand.
is that meetings take as long as we have time to
Available.
get.
I understand. I understand that
And,
rule.
you know, you said 4 hour meetings, you said, let's make them 2 hours. All got covered. You know, so I think that if we had 10:30 meetings, we would find a mechanism to make sure we get to the end of it.
It's going to take discipline,
Yeah.
both as to the individual alders and as leadership of the council, to hit some people over the head.
But we don't have any reason why that would occur, other than you're boring the shit out of me, so just get to the point. You said it 3 times.
I actually went up to one council Lloyd a long time ago.
Council Lloyd?
Council Lloyd, Alder Lloyd. And I said, don't you have a sex life at home? I mean, it was rude as I could, it was as rude as I could get.
David, what's your proposed remedy on this? I mean, would you direct the CCEC to come up with some rules that would shorten the meetings? I mean,
Well, one, to put a cap on it, that we start at 6:30, you know, we end at 10:30 or 11. And then if we are having to adjourn repeatedly and then meet the next day, then do some rules that would really put a stop to it.
Are you the
you know,
person or was it someone else who was talking about there are limits on the amount of time that a council member can speak, but that it's never enforced?
No.
I mean, are you suggesting that should be enforced?
I would think I think a directive to the city clerk that they should put the timer on alders, just like they do on public
Yeah.
speakers, would be an incentive.
I think it'd actually be incredibly beneficial for everybody to see the timer, frankly, so, I mean, like, you know, if.
We could have a big clock.
No, seriously,
Everybody could
because
be watching
I think
it.
if I'm an alder and I'm going on and on and on, and all of a sudden it says that I've hit, you know, 11 minutes, everybody in the room knows that I've been talking for 11 minutes now, including me, and at some point, you know, there's hopefully a pressure to go, should I really be talking for 11 minutes? Like, well, what on earth am I doing? And if there's not, you could at least, you know, you can go, you know, Alder, just so you know, the clock says you've been talking for 12 minutes, you know, with, you know, point of order, could you please wrap it up or be more concise? That's an easy investment.
When do you do arguments before a court, like the Court of Appeals or Supreme Court? They have 3 lights, green, yellow, and sit down. Okay?
Give each alder a light?
No, just have it up in the clerk's up on the bench.
The clerk has a timer. They could just use it. They just don't use it on.
But the problem is, if they have the timer, are they gonna go wag their finger at the older? So either have.
No, it makes a noise.
Okay.
It goes ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, the first time it dings and you go past that's the time, and the person will continue to go on. They have no idea that they've now doubled or tripled or quadrupled the amount of time. So I think like a visual, let's get a clock up.
Can we add that to the, is that on the list here?
How much would a clock cost?
I think we have that in it.
I think some of us might buy it.
Yeah, some visual cue to do it. And then the other part is, I mean, we have, alders can speak 3 times on an issue? Twice. Oh.
On a matter, which is
Also not enforced.
Also not.
Also not enforced, or it includes the motion, but it also includes an amendment to the motion.
Oh,
So you get 2 times.
per each.
2 times 2.
Yeah. Then you get the amendment to the amendment.
The other issue that comes up potentially is looking at the agenda and seeing exactly what the Common Council has to act on and what may be able to be done administratively. I'll give you an example, and I don't know if there are other examples. Years ago, picnic beer permits were voted on by the Common Council. And when I was, when I was president of the council, I voted we would never have a special meeting on a picnic beer permit because that's exactly what was happening, because everybody's favorite group got it in late. And when I adopted my grand policy, the first group that was late was the NAACP. And there was no way in hell I was going to tell the NAACP where to go. So we had a special meeting. State law got changed. Picnic beer permits are now issued routinely by the city clerk. If a council person has a problem with one, they can ask to be brought to the council. So the question I have is anything from the city's attorney's perspective that can be taken off the agenda and handled administratively? Maybe, we would take a change in state law. I mean, is there anything so routine, that we would basically not put it on the agenda? Or does the consent agenda really
Consent agenda
obviate
deals
that?
with most of that stuff now.
I mean, we have those survey maps which we approve, and nobody knows what they are.
As a person that's
figured
traveled
it out.
around the state listening to public meetings, some people bring I don't even know if they have to, but especially town meetings, they bring every expense to the meeting, to have to be approved.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's
They
required or not.
They
and
read them
them.
out and go
Yeah.
yeah.
$512.36 for snow plowing.
You'll recall I did a memo on claims filed with the city because some alders wanted to start debating each claim that had been filed with the city. We're able to stop that.
Well, I don't know if some things on the agenda that need to be on the agenda, or whether or not the consent agenda is obviated.
Yeah, the consent agenda deals with it, but I mean, just the fact, I mean, I bring up the survey thing because, just a few years ago, a council member who was really engaged in, I mean, I'll say it, Liddell, I mean, she knows planning and everything. She said to me once we were going through the agenda, she said, "What the hell are these survey things that we're approving week after week?"
A lot of these, the state law says they have to be approved by the council.
Yeah.
Good place for a consent agenda.
Yeah. So I got to add in here that things you said that I don't think are captured in here, that you lose people on TV, additional people were there, that it would be nice to have better rules and better enforced by the council, and employ some visual aid as to when someone's time is ended on debate.
Yeah, and it reduces participation at the council.
That's right.
Oh, that is there, okay, the TV, all right.
What I would really like is to have a speaker in the council like they have a speaker in the parliament.
Oh, yeah. People would pay to have that job.
Here's how we fund all the new initiatives.
For one night, you get to.
All right, are there any other topics under this meaningful engagement topic? It's considered in a couple of meetings that we had. I do see here a comment about the new legislar.
Yeah, it came up in one of the
Yeah,
early meetings.
yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, if not, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to talk about future meetings and topics for discussion. And we have one more meeting scheduled before we commit this to writing, and that being John Strange's homework. For a while, we take a little break here. We don't have to have that meeting if we don't feel we need it. I don't know if there's anything that we haven't covered, and we get started on that early. I think I was asked not to say where it came from, so I won't. But there was one suggestion that it might be useful for everybody to go around the table and just give their idea. They had the power of the Wizard of Oz, and they could change the structure of city government, how they would do it. And is that a useful exercise? Now, keeping in mind, we're not supposed to make recommendations, but it might be.
Shouldn't you say that for the full task force?
We could save it for the full task force.
My recommendation would be not to meet on February 8th, to give John additional time to write.
Well, I'm all for that, if there's no function that we
No
need to have.
objection.
Anybody have? Okay, so,
I won't be here on the 8th anyway, so
oh, well, where are you gonna be? We'll be there.
I'll be somewhere warm.
Or somewhere warm. Undisclosed location, city attorney has said. All right, so we will not have a meeting on the 8th. John, the meeting for March 1st is to review and discuss the report. And,
So I would plan to have a full draft. We plan to have a full draft to you for discussion at that meeting, so you can get it sometime well in advance.
yeah,
A week ahead of
that's what I was
time
gonna ask you.
to read it. I think, Mike, you're out until the 17th, you said?
Yes.
Yeah. So that leaves time for him to get back and read it and edit it.
I'm gonna be out of town for about
And then
6
the
days
next
in the middle of February.
T-Fog's meeting is on the 12th, so theoretically, you could schedule another meeting after the first, in between the two, if you wanted to finalize the whole thing.
Yeah,
I mean, you don't have to do that now, but you could, on the
Yeah.
first, you could decide whether you did.
yeah, we could have one on the 8th
Yep.
to come back. I'm sure the others, the BCCs will be doing the same as well.
Their meeting next week is probably their last.
Right, and then I imagine they'll schedule one more for sometime before the 12th.
And we do have a TFOG's meeting next, a full committee meeting on the Wednesday night. Okay, yes, thank you all for coming and for getting through all this hard work on this. Only one, there was some people.